Welcome to Statues and Monuments, and in today's programme,
some extraordinary stories, a tribute to unsung heroes, the miser who gave London a great gift, a guy with animal magic, and the Victorian who flushed away the great stink of London.
if you walk along the side of the Thames from Chelsea Bridge to Blackfriars Bridge, you can feel beneath your feet the magnificent engineering achievement that is the Chelsea, Albert and Victoria embankments. Work on these massive constructions began in 1868 and was completed 6 years later in 1874. It was a huge engineering project, and it was designed, put through and completed by one of London's great unsung heroes, Joseph Bazalgette, then Chief Engineer to the Metropolitan Board of Works. And here, hidden away by Hungerford Bridge, albeit on the embankment, is this disappointing bust of Bazalgette. It's filthy. Engineer of London drains. It was said of him he had time only for making children and working on London.
Your relationship with Sir Joseph Bazalgette is what?
He was my great-great-grandfather, so I didn't know him that intimately, or to put it another way, I didn't know him at all.
No, but you know of him in the sense of the family scrapbook.
It gives one an insight into those sort of huge Victorian families. He married Maria, who was Irish. He had at least 12 children, and of course far more grandchildren.
He was French, wasn't he?
Yes, although of course he wouldn't have thought that. He'd have thought himself as very English. It was his grandfather, Jean-Louis Bazalgette, who'd come across from France in the late 18th century. He was an adventurer. And then Sir Joseph was an engineer, and we associate being an engineer with, rather stolid, big moustache, clan everything and so on. But actually, he was radical, he was ambitious. The sheer scope of the sewage system was really very modern and very radical.
He built more of London than anyone else before or since. He built famous bridges, famous streets, famous parks, but above all, he built the system of main drainage, which stopped London's sewage from flowing into the River Thames and thereby stopped Londoners from poisoning one another with their own output.
Where we're sitting, just beneath the Savoy Hotel, on the riverbank, would have been a river, where our feet are.
Indeed, Ray, if we'd been sitting here 150 years ago, we would have been literally up to our necks in sewage.
And it got so bad that the Houses of Parliament had to put great sheets to stop the stench.
Indeed, you're referring there to the Great Stink of 1858, when the River Thames was so full of sewage and the weather was so hot that members of Parliament were unable to use the recently rebuilt Houses of Parliament, and they fled from the rooms overlooking the river, and at that point they decided they really had to do something about London's sanitation problem. He was forgotten for many years, basically, I think, because most of his great works are invisible. The sewers are invisible, you don't think about them. The great streets that he built, you don't think of having been built. You think that streets just happen when someone puts up buildings on either side. And the embankment where we're sitting now, although he reclaimed 35 acres to build it, you don't really think of it as something that had to be built. Really, the only things of Bazalgette's that you see are the three great bridges that he built across the Thames at Putney, Battersea and Hammersmith.
Joseph Bazalgette's been an enormous inspiration in my work. most notably because I find myself coming across his work in various sites across the city, but certainly in his work on bridges and connecting the north and south of the city, it's clear that the work of those bridges were not just monuments in themselves, they were actually at the heart of them, perhaps the greatest creative part of them, was the way they knitted the city together.
My son goes to a school by the river and every day crosses Hammersmith Bridge, which is rather nice. So he crosses his great-great-great-grandpa's bridge. And I think that he's chuffed about that.
But rumour has it some were not so chuffed at the time, so no prominent statue. But now surely it's time.
In my opinion, he should be occupying the vacant plinth in Trafalgar Square on the grounds that he built more of London than anyone else before or since.
Bazalgette was a great Victorian engineer who had a holistic view of London and made London the London we know today.
I think Sir Joseph was given a bit of a raw deal in the way London recognised his work. He's got this small bust by Northumberland Avenue on the Thames. And if you compare that to, say, all these military men with their massive statues all around London, we can't remember what any of them did. They charged left or they charged right. But, you know, they didn't design a modern city and cure a modern city of cholera and typhoid. So I think the size of the bust is a bit of a kick in the teeth.
I suppose because he was just an engineer, he doesn't get a better monument. But London has a lot to thank you for. And quite frankly, Joe, I think the whole thing stinks. One of the best known hospitals in London is Guy's, called Guy's after a guy called Guy, a bookseller, Thomas Guy, made a lot of money selling Bibles and speculating. His fortune, he gave it all, £200,000, a vast amount of money in his time. All of it, it was the foundation of this hospital, but it might have been otherwise. Oh yes, it might have been otherwise. According to the story, Thomas Guy was notoriously tight-fisted, a confirmed bachelor, whatever that means. But he had considered marrying one of his servants, a lass called Sally, who was, by reputation, as mean as he. But once the engagement was announced, Sally went giddy and ordered on Thomas's account repairs not just to Thomas's house, but those of the neighbours. Thomas was appalled. At such generosity, he sent Sally packing and called the wedding off, vowed and did leave his fortune to found this hospital. Thomas Guy, a mean old git to himself, but to us, he gave the hospital. His memorial stands here in what's today the Consultants' Car Park, sculpted by Peter Shoemakers in 1733, a few years after Thomas Guy died. To the very end, a confirmed bachelor. For really popular characters, however, the English choose animals. It comes as no surprise that scattered throughout London, there's no shortage of statues to animals. But here at London Zoo is what must be the most popular animal statue of all time. To Guy the gorilla. Hello, Guy. It's sculpted by William Timmin, 1982, in bronze. It's a slightly larger than life size, but these enormous shoulders and broad back and great arms. And Guy lived in the London Zoo for 30 years.
Nothing you could take and tear me away from my God. Nothing you could do, 'cause I'm stuck right glued to my God.
I'm with Keith Lloyd, who you knew Guy.
I did as a child, actually. I never
Yeah.
had the privilege of working with him. But,
Right.
he was a truly remarkable gorilla and had a big influence in my life, I suppose. He was that charismatic.
Where did he come from?
Well, he was wild caught in the Cameroons in 1946 and arrived here at London Zoo on November the 5th, Guy Fawkes Day, 1947.
Aha! Hence Guy.
Hence the name, exactly.
I never knew that.
Yeah, and the rest of it, most of the rest of his life, he was on his own because it was thought too dangerous to put a female gorilla with him.
Yeah.
But finally, when we had a new house built for Guy, we got a young female in for him, and they got on extremely well. But unfortunately, because Guy had been on his own for so long, he didn't really know what to do. So I'm afraid he never had any children.
Celibate.
Yes, I'm afraid so. A monk's existence.
What a shame, no babies.
A real shame. Guy was quite a large animal. I think he weighed around about 480 pounds. But I know he did have a 72-inch chest measurement, which is quite remarkable.
A bit bigger than you and mine.
Well, I think both of us together, to be
Yeah, I
honest.
think so.
As a matter of opinion, I think he's tops.
Guy the real gorilla was inspiration for the actors who played the apes in the film 2001 A Space Odyssey. They came here to study his mannerisms. Now, you can't get close to the statue, not anymore. Bronze gets hot in summer, so they've put a fence for everyone's safety.
For all the curiosity and affection we have in the zoo for other animals, Guy the bronze gorilla will always be number one.
God. There's not a man today who could take me away from my God. Tell me more. There's not a man today who could take me away from my God.
Britons have fought so many wars, and this Imperial War Museum in South London is stuffed with reminders and relics, yet leaving you to do the thinking. What was the point of some of these conflicts? The site of the War Museum here in Kennington used to be a lunatic asylum. Bedlam, the notorious hellish loony bin. It's interesting, throughout London, statues to war almost always commemorate leaders.
Wellington, Nelson, the strategy genius Viscount Portal, one to Bomber Harris, and Churchill, of course. But there are monuments to help us remember extraordinary, ordinary people who might otherwise be forgotten. Like Edith Cavell, wrongly executed for being thought a spy, merchant seamen, and the brave Blitz firefighters.
And that's what good statues are for. It's only recently, though, that London has at last recognised the contribution to British war from volunteers from the Indian subcontinent, men and women from Africa and the Caribbean, who joined British fighting forces in 2 world wars as nurses and soldiers and sailors and Air Force pilots. These gates now commemorate those brave men and women, 5 million of them, all volunteers. They stand on Constitution Hill, slope above Buckingham Palace here at Hyde Park Corner. But the monument wasn't erected until the 21st century. It says here, foundation stone laid by the Queen Mother, but that's not true. She was ill that day, and so her daughter, the Queen, laid the stone for her. The memorial gates have 4 columns, each topped by an African urn. The names on the columns are hand-carved. It took 3 days to put each name into the Portland stone. And in the roof of the little temple are the names of those who received the George Cross and those who received the Victoria Cross.
My rank is Sergeant Major.
A craftsman first class in the Royal Air Force. Major.
My name is Abraham Williams. I rose up to the rank of Colonel.
Senior first class aircraftsman. Served first in the West African Air Corps, which was the first one we started, and then from there transferred to the Air Force.
My position was to train all RAF recruits that leaving the West Indies.
I was a pilot when war broke out, and there was an advertisement in the newspapers asking for pilots for the Royal Air Force. I refused to take off my turban, and a special helmet was prepared, so I flew throughout the war for 7 years with a turban on.
When we heard about this war, I was actually studying in the school and joined it voluntarily.
So many films have been made here, Battle of Britain, and they all shot American, Canadians. No one in this country knew that even a single Indian had taken part.
You often hear English people getting excited. Oh, we fought alone, we did all alone. Because they didn't know the 5 million Indians in the 2 wars fought for them. And of course, African, West Indian troops.
That is forgotten, everything forgotten.
It's a shame that all the people who died for us, for this country, were not remembered until now. Well, the gate is quite a remarkable, what I should say, achievement for the people who have served. This is something that I see as a step forward. After so many years of contribution we have made towards certain conflicts. Our patron, Prince Charles, was quite pleased. He was one of them who was chosen to design. My father was also in the war, so I'm entitled to wear the Burma Medal.
The first medal here is the Distinguished Flying Cross. This is the ultimate, it's the highest award that any pilot during a war can be awarded.
But why has it taken so long for a monument to these brave men and women to be erected? And at whose instigation?
Many people thought of doing a memorial, but unfortunately they never managed to quite get the thing into reality. They thought about different ideas, different designs, but I think that now we have at last been able to get a memorial. And it is very necessary for us to have this memorial because a lot of young people are growing up who originated from the countries which are commemorated on the memorial. Their grandfathers, their great-grandfathers fought to save the freedoms that we enjoy today. And I think they should know about it. When you think of the number of countries we wanted to commemorate, we couldn't really have a statue because it would never encompass all the different kinds of people. So we were looking for something which would be non-representational. And then we got this place from the Royal Parks who wanted to close Constitution Hill on Sundays and special days when they have state occasions.
We supported this particular design because it responds so imaginatively and creatively to the wider architectural context in which it sits. This isn't just a monument at the end of another street in London. Liam O'Connor's magnificent design in the classical tradition that brings in influences from overseas seems to us to be the perfect solution to providing a monument that commemorates the fallen from those countries and creates something that enhances that wider architectural composition.
The opportunity to consider a merging of Eastern and Western architectural forms in one place, but somehow give them a sense of belonging to the London landscape. That was a crucial thought. The piers are, apart from being a subtle reference to Luchin's cenotaph in Whitehall, are based on more Western geometrical principles, and the pavilion really belongs in its sort of geometrical identity to Mughal architecture of northern India. It's very much also a piece of traditional English landscape architecture. We were privileged to have such a fine team of committed craftsmen really to execute the project.
This has been one of our most challenging projects, to select the stone, which is Portland limestone from the Isle of Portland in Dorset, and actually cut and shape it to the sizes and the types of stone that are required for these 4 massive piers. Each one in their completed state has over 60 tonnes of completed stone, which would be something like 100 tonnes in its raw state. Our first process is to produce a set of detailed working drawings and make full-size templates of the stones for the masons. Some of the stones are very intricate and have had to be hand-carved using mallet and chisel, very much in the traditional way that's been used for thousands of years.
The bronze elements were a very important part of the project, and it took a great deal of skill. We wanted to get away from the traditional idea of large gates sort of strung across a major highway in the centre of London. The idea that we came up with to replace that was a series of hydraulic bronze bollards which come up out of the road.
We've provided London with a new landmark, and it is to commemorate the truly forgotten people.
It is long overdue that the gates have come up.
I'm going to take my grandchildren and their friends and everybody and say, this is what was put here to remind you what your granddad did, your great-grandfather did.
Fantastic. I think they are really exceptional.
I am very delighted to see at last we've got it.
There's an inscription on the gates by the poet Ben Okri that sums up the sentiments of us all.
I so much wanted it to be an inscription that looked forward with hope and with inspiration and with encouragement, rather than look backward only with regret and with sadness. I wanted it therefore to be a positive inscription and an open one. Those who died sacrificed their lives that those who live might have richer lives. So it's meant to always enrich the future generations from all the different continents. But more than that, it's also meant to be about humanity. So those who look at those words also speak to them. Only free people can make a free world. Infect the world with your light. Help fulfill the golden prophecies. Press forward the human genius. Our future is greater than our past.